Hola, cage fighting connoisseurs. This is KidNativeBloodyElbow.com. I'm going to be monkeying with my lighting here a little bit because gloomy morning, trying to see. No, I shouldn't mix artificial light and natural light. Let me see what I can do here. No, that's no better. Doing a full Luke Thomas here. I still don't have light behind me. Let me shut this one too. Forgive me, folks. I'm here to do the one and only Bathrobe review of UFC Fight Night Japan, Hunt versus Nelson. I believe I just called it. Yep, Hunt versus Nelson. And a bonus MMA bunker about Wandy Silva. His retirement announcement, Thiago Silva. I think I'm going to switch this to over here just to be a little more bunker-like. Alright. Sorry about all this wackiness. Alright. Wandy Silva's retirement and the UFC's announcement that it's indefinitely suspending Anthony Rumble Johnson based on a report from Bloody Elbow's own Brent Brookhouse about new domestic violence allegations. And that's all they are, is allegations. I trust Brent's reporting, but that's all he reported, was that Johnson's got a woman he's had a relationship with, or allegedly had a relationship with, and she's accusing him of striking her. And that she's definitely gotten a restraining order and filed police reports in Florida. Also, Wandy Silva announced his retirement in a bitter video, and Thiago Silva's ex-wife released videos showing him apparently high on cocaine and waving a gun around and acting paranoid. UFC cut him permanently. So, let's start with the fights. Really good night of fights. I'd have to say I'd give the whole event 4 stars. I'd watch it as soon as you can. I'd watch it now. Overall, just really fun. Remind me why I love Japanese MMA so much. Brought back some connections with history. Definitely, it wasn't like Pride again or anything, but you know, it felt good to see some life in Japanese MMA. And so, even if the UFC is losing money, this is the Lord's work they're doing here by keeping MMA alive in Japan, keeping fighters like Yoshihiro Akiyama, Takanori Gomi, Kyoji Horiguchi, Katsunori Kikuno going in front of the fans. Anyway, but let's run through it fight by fight. First up, featherweight Maximo Blanco beat Daniel Hooker in a heck of a fight. Hooker has way more tough than sense. He just kept coming forward and took a sustained beating from Blanco. But Blanco was so gassed at the end of the fight. Hooker was still coming, and Blanco collapsed after the fight was stopped. After the third round came to an end, he won a unanimous decision, but Hooker won 1 round on all 3 cards, and really impressed, although you got to question the wisdom of his decision. But a very impressive debut from a tough UFC debutant and Daniel Hooker. Curious to see where what weight he fights out with more time. Maximo Blanco did great. I mean, fighting a human zombie who's got a big height and reach advantage and never stops coming can't be easy, especially for a fighter like Blanco who's infamously unfocused. So good to see him getting a couple wins in a row. Looked good. His punching technique, he managed to get on the inside and bust that kid up. I mean, he landed some vicious uppercuts, and his wrestling game looked decent. It looks like he's maybe on the verge of putting it together. Surely a searing experience, and the toughest challenge we've seen Blanco overcome in his UFC run. So I'd go ahead and watch that now because it is just incredible. It's 15 minutes of straight action, no let up the whole time. A great fight. I'd watch it now. I'd give that one 4.5 stars. Rare for me to give a decision that many stars, but it was just a great fight. And up next, lightweights, Johnny Case upset Kazuki Takadome with a guillotine choke, technical submission, choked him the fuck out. I believe they called it a TKO at the time, if I can remember right. I could be wrong about that, because Case basically knocked him the fuck out and then choked him, and Takadome was unconscious and unable to tap. Anyway, I'd give that 3.5 stars. Really nice fight, back and forth action, exciting ending. I'd watch it now. Just good shit, you know. What can I say? And that brings us to bantamweights. Kyung Ho Kang defeating Michinori Tanaka by decision, split decision. 29-28 on 2 cards, 28-29 on the third. A great fight, back and forth grappling all the way, good action. It wasn't like the most technical jiu-jitsu match, but it was fun grappling, and nothing really it wasn't like some just shit fest. It was fairly skilled. It was good stuff. I'd give it 3 stars. I'd watch it later, but only because this card is so stacked with action. But if you're just going through the card, watch the whole thing. Excellent fight. And then welterweight Hyungyu Ace Lim, TKO Takanori Sato, first round 1 minute 18. Ace Lim looked brutal. I'd give this 3.5 stars. I'd watch it now. Sato looked old and terrible. Probably shouldn't have been in the cage, but it is what it is. Good, kind of a gimme for Ace Lim, but he took advantage of it. Did what he needed to do. 2 fights in a row, won by Korean fighters over Japanese fighters, but the Japanese fans were good sports about it. He didn't hear any of that kind of Brazilian style, you're going to die type stuff. I've been looking forward to seeing Ace Lim against some tougher competition in the welterweight division. And that brings us to featherweights. Katsunori Kikuno defeating Sam Sicilia by submission in the second round, rear naked choke. Love Kikuno. He was having trouble getting his karate game going, though. Sicilia was busting him up on the feet, but Kikuno managed to get the takedown, get the choke, get the win. So nice to see him getting a UFC win, a second UFC win. Nice to see him doing well in the featherweight division. Look forward to seeing more of him down there. I'd give it 3 stars. I'd watch it later, but only because the rest of this card is so great. So if I'm telling you to watch a Kikuno fight later instead of now, there's some competition for quality right there. All right, and then the final fight in the prelim card, Masanori Kanehara, former Sengoku featherweight champ, defeated Alex Bruce Leroy Caceres, unanimous decision. Caceres really only turned it on in the third round. Kanehara dominated position the first 2 rounds. Good fight, 3 stars. I'd go ahead and watch it now just because I think more people care about Caceres. Want to see what happened. He fought his way to the top 10. Big disappointment. Second loss in a row. He lost to Uriah Faber last time out. So a great debut from Kanehara, who's got, I think, like a 5-fight win streak and then a disqualification loss. So he's been on a bit of a roll before coming to the UFC. It comes in on a good point. I think Kanehara might be somebody maybe who can make some waves in the featherweight division. We'll see. Brings us the main card and a kid who will definitely be making waves in his division. Kyoji Horiguchi defeated John De Los Rios, first round TKO. Reyes was a last-minute substitute. Supposed to be Chris Carriazo, who got called up to a title fight. This is much better. This is what Horiguchi needs, is some showcase fights. Let him build a rep. Let him get confident. Let him build his skills, because this kid's coming. And it's going to be a factor in the flyweight division. I'm really confident. But they could derail him if they throw him in at the deep end too fast, which, throwing him against Carriazo might have been too much too soon. I don't know. We'll see how they handle him. But the choice is yours, UFC. To me, it's great to see a young Japanese fighter with tons of potential, training with Kid Yamamoto, great skill set, great athleticism. Looking forward to more from Horiguchi. I would watch that one now. I'd give it 3.5 stars, maybe 4 stars, just for the fun of seeing a young talent on display. And then welterweights, Kichi Kunamoto defeated Richard Walsh in a bullshit split decision. Richard Walsh dominated this fight the whole way. Do not see how anybody gave Kunamoto 2 rounds. Maybe 1 I could see, but 2, no way. I'd give it 2.5 stars, docking it in a star for the decision. Pretty good action fight otherwise, though. I'd watch it later just because the rest of this card is so stacked. And then in women's bantamweights, Miesha Tate, Ren Nakai. This is probably the fight I talked about the most before the card. Worst fight on the card by far. Ren Nakai needs to cut down to strawweight or flyweight. No question. She is too small to be hanging with these women's bantamweights. Miesha Tate was way too big for her. Nakai's barely 5'1". She says she's 5'1". I think she's more like barely 5 foot. Very stocky, but she wasn't strong enough in the clinch to impose her judo game at all, which meant Miesha Tate had a free rein to strike and yet could barely do anything. So it was just a shitty fight. I give it 2 stars. Disappointing performances from both ladies. Ren Nakai, a big bust so far. I'd like to see her move down to flyweight and see what she could do at 125. with these new gals, or strawweight, the new division. I'm not even keeping up. Like, she needs to move down. If strawweight's the new division, man, that might be tough for her to make 115 pounds, and it might be. That might be very tough. She's going to have to definitely trim some muscle. Anyway, it was a shitty fight, disappointing performance all around. And that brings us next. Welterweight, Yoshihiro Sexyama Akiyama defeated Amir Sadali. Unanimous decision, 30-27 all the way across. Sadali was game. Akiyama was dominant. He didn't overwhelm. His offensive rate of production was a little lower than what you'd hope for, but he landed some huge punches and got a couple of sweet takedowns. So Akiyama was in full effect. Nice to see him get the win. Gutsy performance from Sadala. Nothing to write home about. I'd watch this one now just because it's Sexyama and everybody loves him, and he was definitely sexy. Sweet technique out there. I'd give it 3.5 stars. Good fight. And then up next, lightweight, Miles Jury destroyed the legendary Fireball Kid Takanori Gomi. First round, minute 32, take KO. I'd give this one 4 stars. I'd watch it now. Miles Jury looked very impressive. Gomi never got his game going at all. Pretty sad to see the Fireball Kid just getting crushed, especially when he had a win streak going other than that bullshit decision loss to Diego Sanchez. But, I mean, they need to be booking Gomi in against guys at a little bit lower level competition. I think it was cool to let Jury get over on him, build some confidence in the kid, because I think Jury's for real and he's going places. This is a worthy match for Gomi. But at this point, let Gomi have some more fun fights against veterans who are over their peak days, because it doesn't look like he's got what it takes to compete at the very top level of the division anymore. And then that brings us to the headliner. Mark Hunt defeated Roy Nelson. Second round, KO, walk away, uppercut. I'd give this one 4 stars. Great fight. I'd watch it now. Everything you'd expect from these guys. Both guys looked good. Roy Nelson was actually probably outlanding Hunt. It's just Hunt's so tough, so hard to hurt, and his power is so incredible, So bit of a setback for Big Country. Great fight for Mark Hunt. I don't know if he's getting any closer to a title shot, but it's always fun to watch him fight. So totally delivered. All in all, really fun card. Staying up all night wasn't so bad, or wouldn't have been so bad if the baby wasn't vomiting all night and keeping my wife awake. And so I was having to sort of help out with that while trying to live tweet. So that took some of the fun out of it. And I'm going to have to be up with a sick baby today instead of sleeping in. So life goes on. Poor me, the travails of MMA blogger. It is as easy as it looks, folks. So you should hate me. You're right to hate me. I've got a pretty sweet gig, pretty sweet family. It's just a lot of responsibilities in the old world. And now the promised MMA bunker. Ton of shit happened yesterday afternoon. The UFC always seems to stomp all over their fight events these days. Although this wasn't their fault. 3 things happened independent of the UFC. The UFC reacted to 2 of them. The biggest one it hasn't had a chance to react to yet. So first off, Thiago Silva, domestic violence suspect, was charged with attempted murder at one point. Was engaged in a siege standoff with the SWAT team in Florida late last year. Spent a few months in jail. Then his ex-wife disappeared and stopped cooperating with the police, left the country. So all charges were dropped. So the UFC re-signed him. Then yesterday his ex-wife put some videos that appeared to show Thiago coked out of his mind, totally paranoid, looking for men in the closet with a gun in his hand. So it wasn't a good look. It wasn't somebody the UFC wanted to be associated with. They cut him. They shouldn't have re-signed him in the first place. It was totally inexplicable. I mean, it's like, yeah, he was not convicted of anything, but he wasn't cleared either. And the fact absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, especially when you already had a SWAT standoff. Like, the SWAT team didn't make that up. That wasn't just some bitch running her mouth. This was a guy who terrified a lot of people to the point that a SWAT team was called out and to have a standoff with an armed man for hours. So, despite the fact that the case fell apart, the woman says that she was scared away by Thiago's friends, which he's a scary dude and he's got some scary friends. So I couldn't blame her at all if that's what happened. He never got to tell his side of the story. Maybe there's more to the story than what we've heard. We don't know. Regardless, if you're the UFC, why do you want to associate yourself with a guy having these kind of problems who's accused of these kind of things. And so in this climate with the whole media feeding frenzy about the NFL, they're just lucky Roger Goodell was out there cutting his own throat yesterday in a farcical press conference about Ray Rice now that the cover-up's been completely exposed. But it gives the UFC no leeway for forgiveness or second chances on domestic violence. And that brings us to Anthony Rumble Johnson. Brent Brookhouse broke a story. I edited it for what it's worth, helped edit it and helped him vet the materials that he was putting together and talking to the source, which is a woman who claims to be Anthony Rumble Johnson's baby mama. I saw there's plenty of pictures on her Facebook page of her with Anthony Johnson's dogs and two babies that look a whole lot like Anthony Johnson. He hasn't denied being the father, so we suspect this is a woman who's had two of his kids. Trying to remember the story that I got to see, because I got to see Brent's materials and hear about his conversations with the source in great detail. There's a lot of stuff he didn't put in the story. So the things I heard were worse than what were reported. However, it's important to note that all Brent reported were allegations. Now, I trust his reporting. I was in on it. I saw it. I saw the proof. I saw the text. I saw the police reports. But it's just one person making an accusation. The police reports are all basically the police responding to one person making an accusation. So Anthony Rumble Johnson has not had his day in court. He's not had a chance to tell his side of the story. This stuff, the woman claims there's a video of him punching her in the supplement store where she works, knocking two of her teeth out. We have not seen the video. We do not know for sure the video exists. If the video comes out, obviously that's a whole different ballgame, and that's probably it for Anthony Rumble Johnson's UFC career, sad as that is, because he's an incredibly talented, scary fighter. But the UFC is just not in a position right now to be associated with something like that, and the NFL precedent with Ray Rice is just people don't want to put up with that bullshit, and especially if they have definitive proof seeing you punching a woman. So for now, the UFC did the right thing. They came out, they cut Silva, which they shouldn't have re-signed him in the first place, but they cut him. I sort of understood their thinking before, but it was mistaken. If I said I supported it, I was an idiot. With the Rumble Johnson, I think they're doing the right thing. They're putting an investigator on the case. They're going to look into it, so we'll see. And a lot of this comes up, again, with what can the alleged victim prove and how far is she willing to take this. So, without that videotape, we don't have perfect knowledge about what happened. All we have is some ugly accusations and gossip, and that's not enough to destroy a guy's life. People do have a right, you would hope, to be able to make their case, their side of the story. Thiago Silva got to make his side of the story, and it was a disaster. It said things like, what did you learn from this? Don't trust women. What do you think is going to come from this? People will forget. They always do. He sounded like a bad movie villain. And so Johnson has had the sense not to make any public comment, neither has his management. His attorney gave a brief statement, saying that he'll be vindicated, blah, blah, blah. So here's hoping. I'd like to see those fights against Alexander Gustafsson. I'd like to see him make a title run. But I don't want to see the UFC heavily featuring somebody embroiled in domestic violence allegations and charges. So especially if real hard proof emerges. Because right now, like I say, the evidence is not that compelling. It was a report I'm proud we got, a story I'm proud we got. Great reporting by Brent Brookhouse, but all it says is this woman's made these accusations. Even she doesn't say she reported the 2012 assault, the alleged 2012 assault, to the police until years later. So there's limited hard evidence unless she actually produces this video. So we'll see. What comes of that. I hope Anthony Rumble Johnson's innocent. Honestly, I'd like to see the kid fight. I'd like to think that he didn't do these things, But at this point, all we have is a he said, she said, and I think this young woman has definitely some grounds to be angry at Anthony Johnson from some of the proof I have seen of his behavior. But whether or not that reached the level of domestic violence, I don't know. So, anyway, hopefully that comes out. I'm not going to be unabashed about rooting for these charges not to be true. However, I'm open to the evidence, and if the charges are true, I don't think they can afford to be associated with the cat. It's just too bad. In this climate right now, just not where you want to be if you're trying to make it in corporate America. And so, then the final thing, Wanderlei Silva comes out, the legendary former Pride champ, longtime UFC fan favorite, came out with a video announcing his retirement and absolutely blasting the UFC, although he didn't name the UFC. Just talked about the promotion and this promotion. He didn't name Dana White. He didn't name Lorenzo Fertitta. He did make some specific allegations that were all about the treatment of Hanan Barao, which I think there's a certain case to be made. I mean, Barao was asked to fight quite a bit. I think Wanderlei was talking about having to fight 3 times in 6 months, and then when he didn't make weight for his title fight against new champ TJ Dillashaw, they didn't pay him, and they threw Barao under the bus. And Silva was infuriated and said, if you're not going to give us money, and you're making rivers of money, that was his term, at least treat us with respect. And so I can agree with that. However, the problem is, with Wanderlei Silva announcing that he's going to be the voice of the fighters, is that Wanderlei spent the last 18 months completely discrediting himself and squandering his capital that he earned as one of the truly great fighters in MMA history. I mean, to me, this guy's a first ballot MMA Hall of Famer. I don't know if he did enough in the UFC to be in the UFC Hall of Fame, and he's certainly not going to be now because it's a favorites award. But in terms of his MMA accomplishments, his title run in Pride was legendary. Yeah, there was some padding of records and some opponents, a lot of non-title fights, and some great opponents that he never fought. Little Nog, for example, he never fought his teammate Shogun Hua at their peak. He lost to Ricardo Arona in a non-title fight and then was gifted a decision in a title fight. Nevertheless, his fights against Sakuraba and Rampage Jackson destroyed Rampage Jackson twice, destroyed Sakuraba 3 times, and that was when Sakuraba was still great for 2 of those. Even though Silva had an enormous size advantage, that was the rules of the game, and Silva nearly lost. He got hurt bad in one of those fights, and so it wasn't just kicking around an old undersized Japanese dude. It was Sakuraba at his peak. He never did that great in the UFC. He lost all his big fights in the UFC, whether it was Vitor Belfort and Tito Ortiz back in the day, before Silva started his great Pride run, or losing to Chuck Liddell at his UFC debut in a great fight, but both of them were just a bit by their sell-by date. Had already lost to Dan Henderson in Pride, and then, lost to Rich Franklin. I believe he beat Michael Bisping. It was probably his biggest win in his UFC run. Regardless, I'm sympathetic to his complaints about the way the UFC behaves. God knows, I think that they've certainly made mistakes and are overbearing and bullies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. However, Wanderlei's behavior on the Ultimate Fighter show, where he managed to make the Japanese fans like Chael Sonnen instead of him, acted like a complete jackass, and then ran from a Nevada State Athletic Commission drug test, which is just completely unacceptable. I think he realized he was never going to be allowed to fight again because he fucked up by doing that. And his lawyers are insisting in a very lawyerly way that the Nevada State Athletic Commission had no right to be drug testing him since he wasn't licensed, but he had for a license, and he was trying to fight. He was scheduled to fight in Nevada, so they're totally within their rights to drug test him. I think it's an important precedent to be set. I think they're going to need to change their procedures, and fighters are going to have to sign an agreement that to accept testing as soon as they accept a bout agreement in Nevada. And the licensing scheduling, maybe people need to be licensed much earlier, as soon as the fight's announced, or within 2 weeks of the fight being announced, something like that. Because it's very important, I think, for Nevada to be able to test people randomly during the course of their training for a fight, rather than the clearly inadequate old system of just piss testing on fight night, which any idiot could get past, virtually any idiot. So, there we go. A bad day of news for the UFC. I don't think Wanderlei Silva did anything to add credit to himself. I just think he sort of is grasping at straws, trying to make himself So, you know, it's a distraction. It's a classic look, hey, look over there issue. Like, yeah, I disgraced myself. Yeah, I ran from a drug test. Yeah, I got into brawls trying to, you know, act like an asshole in Ultimate Fighter to the point where the fans didn't like me anymore. Um, but the UFC is mean to me and other fighters, which is true. But you know, Wanderlei lost his credibility, so he's not the guy we want making that case. If that case needs to be made, it shouldn't be coming from Wanderlei. He needs to deal with this drug test bullshit and his own bad behavior in that regard. So, you know, there you have it. As far as the domestic violence stuff, from a business perspective, the UFC just cannot be in the domestic violence business. They cannot be promoting thugs and wife beaters at all. The climate is completely unforgiving right now, and understandably so. Wife beating is bad. The War Machine story, we haven't mentioned that. It's not just the NFL and Ray Rice. It's former UFC fighter War Machine John Copenhaver in jail currently after an alleged horrific assault on his ex-girlfriend Christy Mack. Just a savage beating that was inflicted on that woman, and you know, then he flees from the police and has to be caught by U.S. Marshals. So complete scumbag behavior, apparently, from War Machine, which, and then there's also ex-UFC fighter Josh Grisby, who's also in jail for allegedly sicking a pit bull on his wife. So, you know, it's just not a good time to be to have a domestic violence incident, you know, and so the UFC can't afford to have guys like Thiago Silva on the roster, and we'll find out whether they can afford to keep Anthony Rumble Johnson around. I hope that he's innocent, and I hope these charges are you know, don't pan out to be anything. Just because I'm a fight fan, I'm a fan of the guy, I don't want to believe that he did these things. But if he did knock this woman's teeth out, if there is video proof, you're gone, dude. Good riddance. So there you go. Kind of an up and down day. Great fights in Japan. Shitty fight news around it. So we'll keep muddling forward. Eugene Robinson will be back on Monday with the Knuckle Up, looking back at this weekend. And then we've got UFC 178 next weekend. You know, damn, already here. So we'll be doing all the care, don't cares, and vivisections for that. Let me confirm that it's UFC 178 that's next weekend. That's September 27th. So, you know, a bit of a disappointment with the flyweight title fight instead of John Jones versus Daniel Cormier, but otherwise a very stacked card. So, I'm looking, yes, UFC 178 next weekend. So we got a lot to talk about. We got the let's see. Let's look at this card. We got the UFC debut of ex-Bellator champ Eddie Alvarez. You've got Conor McGregor returning as toughest test yet against Dustin Poirier. You got Tim Kennedy against Joel Romero. The return of Kat Zingano, probably the #1 contender for Ronda Rousey's title. The return of Dominic Cruz, going to be on the prelims against leather tough veteran Takeya Mizugaki. That should be a great fight. George Masvidal is coming back. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson against Patrick Cote. That's going to be fun as shit. So we've got a great fight card coming up next weekend. We'll be all over it, and hopefully I won't have to do any more MMA bunkers because this shit's ridiculous. All right, adios MMA aficionados. Remember, subscribe to MMA Nation on YouTube. Give me a like on this video. Follow @KidNate on Twitter, although I don't really tweet about MMA stuff there anymore. So follow @BloodyElbow on Twitter. Read me on BloodyElbow.com and give Bloody Elbow's Facebook page a like. All right. Adios, MMA aficionados, for the final time. This is Kid Nate.